Good morning, everyone. Did you get a chance to get some coffee? Yeah? Okay, great. I heard the after party was great, so I guess that's why some of you are missing. So, my talk is titled Make Informed Design Decisions by Understanding Your Audience. But before I start with the talk, several bits about me. My name is Lucijan Blagonić. I live in Zagreb, Croatia. I work remotely. As you can see, I'm specialized in building design systems and style guides. So I'm a designer, but designer that does front-end as well. You could say that in my spare time, I like to think about usability and accessibility and things like that. Sounds boring, but I find it fun. And I'm also an ABBA fanboy and a casual gamer, but I guess that's less important. When you are taking on projects, when you are starting new projects, sometimes that whole process can feel overwhelming because we're not always sure what to do. We are starting to communicate with the client and he has some ideas and we have our own ideas. And the whole point of that process is to make sure that we don't end up solving the wrong problems. And why am I emphasizing the wrong problems? Because every person included on the project has a different perspective about what is considered success for a specific project. So I, as a designer, might think how something looks. Maybe if it looks good, it's going to be okay. A front-end developer or a back-end developer might think about performance, how something, an SEO specialist might think about how something performs, like do we have enough page views and are people clicking on ads? And the client might be the emotional animal in the story who only think about, okay, does it feel right? Is this what I'm getting? Because a lot of times working with clients is a challenge. They often come to us with solutions. They say, I want to include a slider, a carousel on the homepage because I need to showcase more products. But we as designers and developers, as professionals, we need to help them define the process. Although we are eager to try new things. Me personally, as a designer, I love to play with new technologies, new design systems, or some sort of new design approach. But I'm also guided by my past experience because from what I've seen that works from my past experience, I try to implement these approaches in other projects, in new projects. But that can also sometimes be challenging because I can have misconceptions because of personal preferences. So I may think that something works because I like it, because I think it looks cool, but it doesn't mean it will work for that project. But ultimately, we are problem solvers. We like to solve problems. When we have a problem in front of us, we try to find a solution and solve that specific problem. But it's more complicated than that. We are not only solving problems, primarily we are solving user problems. So when I'm talking about user problems, I'm talking about people who are visiting the website that you are building together with your client. Their problems are the ones that we have to solve, because if the users are not happy, then they are not going to buy that product or subscribe to that service that you are building the website for. And in that whole process, if we are to actually get to and finish, to make the project successful, we need to define the problems from the start to know exactly what we are dealing for. Of course, we need to make sure that we are solving the right problems in this case. So we shouldn't be clouded by our personal judgment sometimes. And we should also define clear goals. So what makes the project successful in our eyes and in our client eyes. And I think that the first part of that success is to make sure that we have a healthy communication between us and the client. Because sometimes working with clients can be challenging. They have like different and sometimes crazy ideas, but we are the ones who actually help them get things done. Because like I said, clients define a goal. They know what they are paying for, right? When they pay for something, they want to get results. So in their eyes, a goal might be, let's increase revenue, or let's increase product sales, or number of subscriptions. But we as professionals are the ones who define the process, because we are professionals in our field of work, right? So we are the ones who are going to consult the client, give him the best possible advice that will help him reach the goal. Because clients often, they think that a slider is a solution to their problems. Just an example, but an often example that is used because sliders are not the best in terms of usability. So it's our job as designers and developers, the ones who is communicating with the client, to make sure that we are advising them on what works for them in their specific case, and not only catering to their personal preference or something else. And if we are to do that, I think it's important to leave egos at the door, because I have an ego. All designers, I think, have an ego. They say developers have even bigger egos. I see some of you smiling here. Yeah, I hit a nerve, I guess. Well, it's normal. I think we all have egos, but it's important that when we are working on a project, that we are working towards the same goal. So we have to be on the same page. So it's not only a matter of who is paying your salary, but it's also a matter of if you are feeling good when you're working on a project, if you are feeling that you are contributing to something that you're happy with, because in the end you're going to use that portfolio, that project as a portfolio piece or something like that. So if you are to make the project successful, you have to work together with clients. And before we take on projects, there are some of the basic things that we need to know about the project if we are going to make it work. We need to learn about the project itself, about who is making design decisions from the client side. We need to learn about stakeholders, so everyone who is going to, from the client side, be involved on the project. We need to learn about who we are building website for, like our audience. We need to learn more and in depth about how that audience is using the website. So perhaps we can do a quick example here that the website for Drupal Camp is responsive. So they know that it's important to have the website responsive, because a lot of us, like geeks and IT professionals, use mobile phones all the time, and we are more eager to check something on mobile phones than like on a printed schedule, perhaps. And I think that it's important that, like we talked about leaving egos from the door and taking personal preference out of the window, to actually make decisions based on numbers. And I've seen that, at least in my experience, some of the following techniques really help in that regard. The first one is project questionnaires. It sounds simple. So what are project questionnaires? There are a list of questions for first, and they're a document that you can send to your clients before you even start to talk about functional specifications or even budgets, which help you learn more and understand more about the client and about the project before the project even starts, before you to agree to anything. The greatest thing about questionnaires is that you can use templates. So you don't have to have like a specific set of questions for each project. You can just reuse 20 or 30 or most common questions that really work for you. I personally have, over the time, have grown accustomed to using a set of questions I found in a list apart article. It has around 20, 30 questions, and they are grouped into 5 important sections. First section is audiences, where we ask a client the questions like, who do you feel are your client audiences? How do you feel they communicate with you, and things like that. About outcomes, that is the second category, where we ask the client what he sees, what would he see as a success in his eyes to make the project successful. So we are trying to learn more about what the outcomes of that project is going to be. We try to learn about company voice. So whether if it's a formal company or it's someone that talks to the audience on a personal level, some of the methods, like who is going to create the content for the site. I think that's quite important. And in the end, since Drupal also is a content management system, things like about content management, who is responsible for delivering the content, who will write it in the future, what is the workflow for publishing content, and things like that. And this list that you can use on multiple projects, which is basically the same, and I have used this questionnaire like for mobile apps, for branding, for web apps, for websites, for whatever, because in general, they provide a pretty deep insight into your client way of thinking. But there's also one more thing that's really important with questionnaires and clients is that they are testing if clients are really resolved on working on the website with you. Are they ready to produce some sort of content that is in a sense informal, because questionnaires are something that you're only going to use in-house. You can see if the client is willing to put that effort on his side to write the paragraphs, to write more about himself, and to maybe help you do your job better. Because if the client is not willing to communicate, if all he wants is, yeah, let's do a quick meeting, you come to my office and we'll see if, you know how it goes. I mean, that's not going to work, because sooner or later you're going to need some written information from them. So questionnaires are a good way to start and get them on board on your project management tool or something like that. And I said that questionnaires are something that you would do before a functional specification, before defining budget. So by helping the client fill out questionnaires, you are trying to learn about their goals. You can see if their expectations are even realistic, if they can afford something like they're expecting. Because if they're expecting to, like, for you to help them redesign the website and come on the first page of Google, yeah, it's not going to happen unless they have a lot of money. The second step we talked about earlier is about learning about your visitors. Tools like Google Analytics are quite straightforward. I think that most of the sites nowadays have them. And Google Analytics allows you and empowers you to learn about your audience, well, pretty much on a personal level, which is sometimes a problem. But also, it enables you to see if what client has written in the questionnaire about who he thinks his audience is, you can double check that by using Google Analytics. You can see if what he says it's realistic. Of course, this only works for some of the projects that you're redesigning. If you're starting the project from scratch, then you can use tools like global stats to learn more about audiences based on the specific region or country. Because if we are going to design and build something that works, we need to take a whole lot of aspects into planning. We need to learn about our audiences and how they use the technology. What browsers are we going to support? Because if the client has mentioned in the questionnaire, and that was the case I had several years back, that they want the site optimized for Internet Explorer 7. And I was like, what? Internet Explorer 7, really? And then he said that his the target audience for this was the Chinese market. And I was like, do I want to even work on this project? And the next thing I did was I went and used global stats to check the target audience for China. And what I found out was that Internet Explorer 7 was like 1%, but 8 was around 10. So I advised my client, before we even start to talk about budget, to think about dropping the i7 support because of the trends where it's losing popularity, and focus only on i8. So that saved some money in the process, because if I didn't do that market research in advance, I would probably either I would have to charge him a lot extra, but only for what? 1% of people for a new project. That doesn't make sense. And it's important to learn about with responsive websites are all the new thing in town, and everyone is using mobile phones. It's important to see what are the trends on the mobile. How many people are coming to the website from the mobile phones, and see if we have to cater to them in a specific way. So that's really important to know, because mobile penetration in Croatia is not the same as in US. So if you're working for different type of clients, you need to learn about that. And I'm a designer. So when I talk about Google Analytics, all I see is a bunch of numbers. And I log in, and it's like crazy, a whole lot of drop-down menus and charts and pie charts and whatever, which I usually don't understand because I don't want to dig in that deep. But there are some quite helpful tools for Google Analytics, like custom dashboards. You can import some of the already prepared dashboards that include only the most important things based on your area of interest. So as a front-end developer, I often like to think about performance of the site, how long it takes to load, what pages are most popular, what countries, what browsers. So you can basically import into your Google Analytics a custom dashboard. You can find it in the gallery of Google Analytics, or you can even create your own dashboard that works for you. So if you're only working like strictly on front end, you might want to have a quick access to the browser that are most common, to the systems, to common breakpoints, which you're going to have to think about when you're doing CSS and things like that. So Google Analytics sometimes seems hard and complicated, but we can use the best of it for our own specific cases. So we don't have to be afraid of using technology that is not in our area of interest, because we are not SEO specialists or we are not selling ads. But even we as designers and developers can learn more about our users by using Google Analytics. And it's important to learn how our audience interacts with what we are building, right? And I have seen that by using Heatmaps, which are quite easy to set up, we can get a quite deep understanding of how our visitors are using our website. So this is a heat map example. There are a lot of services like HotJar. I'm going to put a slide with all the resources, which you can later check it out, which offers a free plan for you as well. So you can test it on your personal site or even your company site or whatever, and get some basic insight about what people are clicking the most on your website. So in this specific project, by integrating a heat map, I've seen what are the most common clicked items in the menu. And in that way, when I'm doing a redesign, I can advise the client and maybe get him to drop several of the bullets, which are not that important, or maybe see if something that should be clicked more, like this, maybe it should be more highlighted. So by learning about how our visitors are using our sites, I can make better design decisions. And even if you're already using Google Analytics, if that's all you're going to use because you don't want to try out new services, there is a helpful tool for Chrome. It's called Page Analytics, which basically allows you to do a quick heat map directly from the browser to see what are the links that are most clicked on the website. So the red parts are the ones that are the most clicked, and the green are the ones that are the least clicked. So you can get a sense about if that sidebar is really important, or if you want to remove some sort of content or some sort of user interface element, you might want to think about that when you're designing things. And I think that I mentioned before that having a healthy communication with clients is important. And sometimes it's hard to justify some of the decisions because we are professionals. We know some things. We know that, having 3 sliders on the home page is not going to win you like anything big with users. But sometimes the client doesn't understand that. And you need to show him why you are making something. You need to prove the point, because only then will he understand your perspective and why that is important. So when I was working on the project, I also integrated a heat map and a scroll map, which basically highlights how long are users scrolling on the website. And this enabled me to have a better communication with the clients, because we could easily identify what is really important on the site and see if our decisions were working okay, if our users understand what they had to click. So in this specific example, I've compared the mobile version and the desktop version. You can see that the most important two call to actions are click the most, which makes sense, right? So this was a good decision to make it highlight. The other ones are a little less click, which is okay, then they're down the page. But even this is important. The last one is more clicked than the middle one. And by checking out the heat map and checking out the scroll map, so the red is 100% of the users, which is what they see when they first visit the website, and the blue, it's around 30%. So 30% of your visitors are reaching the bottom of the website. So when I'm talking with client, it's not about, yeah, we should add more blocks because this will showcase the most information, or we should remove some because the page is too long. I mean, the numbers are talking. And even on mobile, you can see that some of the things, like the compact navigation, it's heavily used. So it's easier to pass on those decisions when you can show the client's numbers. And if you can show them something in a visual way, that is a visually appealing way, they will easier connect with you, and they will better understand your ideas, your suggestions, and ultimately your decisions. And the next step is user testing, how to see, because we are just observing from this point, but now we're going to get more involved into learning about our users. When you're doing user testing, so in short, what is user testing? User testing in a traditional way is that you get a bunch of people in the room, like I have now, and you can give them instructions and ask them questions, which will give you better insight into their way of thinking. So we are now all in the same room, so we can do that locally. So I asked you, did you get some coffee, or how was the after party? And I got some feedback from you, and I can then see, okay, I have less people on my talk. It's probably because the after party was great, so people probably got too much to drink or stayed at home. But we can also do that remotely. So it's not only a logistical problem that we have to have like 50 people in a room to do some user testing. User testing can be done with even less people. There are tools and services which you can use for remote testing, and I'd like to show you one, which is it's called usertesting.com. But I think that when I'm talking about, when I'm trying to get people on board with user testing, I think it's important to give them something for free. And I like this service because they offer a free user testing session that's 5 minutes long for everyone. So you can just register on the website. You can send your link, or even a prototype or whatever, like a mobile app, a website, whatever, and you will get back a video of someone, a random user, using your website and describing what they think it's the most important thing on the site, what they think the site is about, and things like that. And all of this is like a free version, which you only test with a random user. I think that it's important to have a fresh pair of eyes on the work that we do. Like I said before, sometimes we have personal preferences that are blocking us from seeing the bigger picture, because we tend to get carried away with details, or we think about, yeah, okay, this is I like this, but you know, the client is not going to like this. So we need to learn about why we are doing things the way we are. And sometimes people are worried about user testing because they think that it's like a really complex thing to do. So how many people do you think are needed to do like a user testing session? Like 10, 5, 15, 100? Yeah, 5? Sorry? Well, in some cases, yes. But Nielsen Norman Group, which is quite famous for doing usability studies, has reached a golden number of 5 people. And 5 people, it's more than enough to find 90% of your usability problems. So even if you can get 5 of your friends, 5 people in the company, or 5 random people from the street or your clients or whomever to go over the site, they will discover 90% of the things that you have missed just because they have a fresh pair of eyes. And in order to do a proper user testing, you need to have some sort of a testing script because you want to have the things structured. You want to see how it works. And I think that it's really important not only doing the user testing, because we can all just include Google Analytics and HotJar and do Heatmaps and do user testing, but if we don't learn anything from it, then it's not like we've done something. So yeah, what if people are clicking the top right link the most? Who cares, right? So it's important to take notes and learn from the findings that we've done before. And I'd like to share an example of a prototype that I have helped test by using these techniques. So this is a front-end editor that is going to be included sometimes in the future in the WordPress community. And it was important to see if people even know how to use this, because today, most of the users that are using the websites usually have no idea how to use them. They have some patterns which they recognize. They have used Word and Office and things like that, but who knows if they're going to use it the way we want them to use it. So the first thing was to test this specific case was to create a testing script. And sometimes that feels like, yeah, I have no idea how to do the testing script, right? But if you're a developer, I'm pretty sure that you have already written about a function specification for how something should work. How do you develop something without knowing how it works? So what we did, we took the ticket from GitHub, an issue, where the developer outlined all the things that the prototype should accomplish. Like the user should be able to change the heading, add image, align text, and things like that. And after that, we opened a Google Docs and grouped all these questions, all these requirements into instructions for the user. So to make it a logical flow for them. So we had one group that was heading, which was the first instruction was edit the heading from this to this. The other was change the heading from a heading to a subheading. Move the subheading below the image, perhaps. So we are testing different flows, which are basically getting feedback from your users. The next step, since we want to do this remotely so that the most people could test it as possible, we need to prepare the testing environment. So we had a basic script, and we decided we would record the screen of people that are using it, or if you're using it remotely, record it for yourself, and create a form where they can answer questions. So even if no one is present, like the instructor of the user testing, people can do it themselves. So what we did, we basically created a Google form with a whole lot of sections, like 20 or so. And each instruction, we created like one section. And an example, for the first instruction where you are supposed to modify the heading, we had 3 questions. First was briefly describe how you would do it. Because sometimes people can say, yeah, okay, I think that I will click on it and then I will be able to change it. And then we can see their train of thought. The second one was perform the actual task. So they would click on the heading and try to change it in whatever way they see fit and possible. And the third one was to rate the experience. Was the experience like that they expected, or was it like total disaster? And this is how it looked. So basically I used the laptop, like I did the prototype on one part of the screen, Google form on the other part of the screen, hit screen recording app in Google Chrome, so you don't even have to have like a separate app or something. You can use a plugin. And someone went through all the questions, did all the tasks, all the instructions, and I got all the feedback from it. So finding volunteers wasn't really hard because, like I said, even if you were testing with random people, you can get a lot of valuable feedback. But since something that is like often is going to be used by a whole lot of people, like an editor, you can get valuable feedback from developers because they use interfaces perhaps different than designers. They use some shortcuts perhaps. That's what they are missing. So you can do several sessions and find out a lot about potential bugs that you are going to have to fix before you move on. And I think that it's important, like I said, to learn from those findings and share notes. So what we did was, when we did some of the user testing, we just written up all the problems that users had with the whole flow. So usually the problems were like, I was trying to create a link, but he created the link before he has written the label and the link disappeared. Like, who would ever like create a link before you select some text? But it happens. And this is something that gets overlooked, but by looking at how people are using your websites, doing sessions with them, you can learn more about that. And even though I said I don't like numbers, I mean, I do like a little bit. When you're using tools like Google Forms to capture your user response, you get a really cool spreadsheet. And with some conditional formatting, you can see what questions fare the best and what questions fare the worst. So you can get a basic information about, in this case, question like 3 and 4, which had some red flags. And we can see what is the problem. Perhaps the question was worded incorrectly. Maybe it wasn't like easy to understand for them. Or maybe the process of doing that specific thing is wrong. And we should change that. Because if we want to cater to our audience, we have to think about that. So this is some of the free tools that you can use to basically do some quick user testing. And everyone can do it, of course, remotely because you only need a computer and you have the testing script available online. So I'd like to wrap up the talk with some actionable takeaways for you to sum up what we talked about. I think it's really important to gather as much data as possible early on, because if you're going to do some of the decisions based on your assumptions, you might end up solving the wrong problems, which is not something that your client is paying you to do. I think it's important that we follow patterns that we know, but we should never be afraid to question them. The example I had with a carousel or a slider, if you will. Usually, we think that people are used to using sliders. And they are. They have little arrows, little dots, which you can click, you can change the slides. But the thing is that sliders perform really badly with users. They don't work. They only see the first slide and they ignore the whole rest. Or they see something moving and they skip on. So people know how to use sliders, but they are not the correct user interface component you should use. So even though you're like making assumptions and you are using like some patterns that you've seen elsewhere, doesn't mean that that pattern is going to work in your website. I think that we all like to browse the web, especially if you're working on the website. We'd like to learn about the competition, about who the client is competing with. And we sometimes get carried away and we think like, okay, they have a really good solution for showcasing products or services. Yeah, we're going to copy that and use it on our website. But the problem is, if we have no idea about their process, we have no idea if their decision on the website is even works for them. So we might end up copying something or getting inspired by, even though we have no idea if it works. So by copying something from others doesn't mean that you will get the same result, because you don't know what the actual results are. And just a free tip for everyone, if you want to test your competition, you can do user testing with their website and see what doesn't work on their website and do it better. So even if you don't have a website of your own, test their website, you know? see how people are using their website and draw information from that and then improve on your own project. And I think that it's important to note, because designers and developers often get carried away, that not everything is an optimizational problem. Sometimes you're just starting with a bad idea. And however long you try to do user tests or do A/B testing or whatever, I mean, it's bad from the start. So if you don't see any results, if you don't see improvement, then try something drastically different, and that might end up getting you in the right direction. I think that it's important to set goals from the start. Like we talked about healthy communication and being on the same page with your client. Sometimes clients come to us and they say, I want to make the website responsive. But what does that even mean? I mean, all websites today are responsive. I mean, just doing something that can be resized doesn't solve perhaps the problem. So I think that's important to define the right goals before you start and have clear goals as well. So make the website responsive is not a goal that you should be fixing. It's make the content accessible on different devices. Because just though something that displays on the mobile phone doesn't mean that the user is going to have an easy time finding the information. So you should have clear goals with your clients and not get carried away on technical lingo or something like that, but trying to have like clear goals which you all are working on towards the same success in the project. And the last but not the least, I think that it's important to be nice to your users. Because we are solving their problems. We are not solving only our problems. And we make websites for real people. And I think that whatever the decisions we end up doing as a part of that process, it's important to make decisions that respect your audience. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Here are some of the resources that you can check out. Mostly are probably things that you have heard before, like Google Analytics, but there are some like HotJar or Peak or Stat Counter for yeah. Yeah, here's one. Yeah.
Yeah. I apologize that my question will be not really directly related to the presentation, but I'm just curious. So in Google Analytics, as I know, the private session trackings are not allowed, like tracking by user ID, but all these videos, how legal is that? That when I visit the website, then I'm watched by somebody in a video. Do you know how it works?
I'm not sure how it's regulated. I've done some testing where I've seen how people are using the websites. For example, HotJar is offering it's also recording users if you want, of course, but they're anonymized. So you can just see how someone used the website. You can see if they're completing the goal that you have set for them. Like it can be like click on the link on the front page, then go to the product, and then click buy, and you can see how he moves through the site to get there. But you can see more like about their interests or like gender or something like that. So I would say it's a gray area. I mean, when I'm doing user testing and user research, I try not to do what I wouldn't want someone be doing to me. So I try to make most of the decisions like anonymously without like going in depth. But I haven't used Google Analytics in that perhaps complicated approaches, so I'm not sure how they're doing that like legally. I mean, it's obviously legal, but is it okay for them to do? You know, it's a gray area. Sure.
Great session. Love your process, and actually, question isn't really related to the session. I just want to see if you can sing your favorite ABBA song for
us. Well, maybe I would have the after party, but I think I'm going to get more coffee before that. But probably it would be Dancing Queen. Yeah. maybe next time. Do we have more questions? One more there in the back.
Currently, I don't work in a web agency, but I have some experience. And the most thing challenging there is because you are switching clients. You are working for a client in one industry, then another industry. The point is that, to me, it's you need some time to learn about your client and his clients, and it's hard at the beginning of the project to know how to approach the best way possible. But you are learning down the road. So I'm wondering, what's your experience and your idea and your suggestion in that direction? Because we can rewrite the whole project after every 2 weeks because we found out something new.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm mostly doing like smaller and medium-sized projects. Sometimes I have parallel projects, so I really relate to what you're saying. Since I don't work on like 5 parallel projects, I need to plan ahead. So the first thing I do when the new client approaches, I send him the questionnaire just so that he has time like filling in, taking his time to write as much info as possible about what they think their audiences is, what goals they're trying to solve. And I try to get them install HotJar just to see how people are using that website. So if I can see that the assumptions I have are like on the correct line, like if something that I think might work, if the results are already showing that. Because a lot of things, there are problems you can just solve by your experience, right? Like, you know that the button should probably be bigger and you should have like less call to actions on the website. It's not exactly rocket science for some of the most common things there. So by getting the client early on board, giving him questionnaires and doing heat maps and scroll maps from the start, and Google Analytics, of course, but they usually all have Google Analytics, I can see if what he has written in the questionnaire even relates to what we are seeing, and I can see if the things that I think about, like what are the problems on the website, are even in connection to the heat maps. So that way I can see from the start if we have identified the real problems. But I think that in some cases, when you are working on bigger clients, you would probably need like 2 or 3 months to get a sense about their audience. So I would say that it really depends on the size of the project, because some of the things that you can like fix from the top of your head, but some things require like further testing and much information as possible. But what I have seen works also. We did that on several projects. Clients usually have a mailing list for their audience, where they send them like special offers or something. And you can talk with the client and send a set of questions to the audience, to the mailing list, and provide some sort of benefit for them in exchange for completing the form. So you might ask a set of questions about what is the most useful feature on the site, what do you even don't use, or something like that, and you can provide like a discount code or something. So you can quickly test the audience with that. So that we did that on Udruga Gradova, do you remember? Where we sent to all the cities in Croatia like a questionnaire where they filled it out, and when we were redesigning the website, we got some really useful feedback. So yeah, I hope that I gave him something to think about. Oh, one more question here.
Great presentation, very nice job. I think it would be helpful for everyone in the audience to know your process or what you do when you find out through your research that the client's content is not engaging, the product, no one wants it, or they're trying to be something that they're not. How do you approach the client and say, you need a wholesale rethink of what you're trying to achieve here?
So I had a recent case where I was working with a company that does some sort of development for plugins for Microsoft Office. And I sent them the questionnaire, and the first thing they did was when I talked to them about what do you think are your goals, how do you approach your audiences, they wrote like a bunch of marketing mumbo jumbo, which they think it should be there because it's on their website. And I had a section about company voice, where they've written in like plain and simple to understand language about what they are trying to do. So by giving the two perspectives, what they think is expected of them when they are communicating with the users and what they actually think when they talk about themselves, I was able to get a more honest, a more truthful sense to see what they are doing. So instead of saying, we do this great thing, blah, 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 they've said, yeah, we are creating really good APIs that are simple to use for developers, which made more sense because their target audience is the developers, not someone who is going to have to upsell their product to someone else. So these questionnaires are a good way to get a sense of it. Usually the problem with content on the website that I can usually solve is by removing content. So it was rarely a situation where I had to approach the client and said, you know, you have like too little information on your website. Usually they have like dozens of pages, nobody reads them. You have no idea like who's even clicking on that. But by using, for example, Heatmaps, you can see what people are clicking on, or Google Analytics, whatever. So sometimes it's just a problem of changing the labels. We had, on that example I had earlier, with the navigation with the hotspots, some of the things were not clicked, but not because there wasn't any valuable information in there. It was the labels were the problem. So by using all these techniques, I can get a broad sense of how to approach that situation the best. I hope I managed to share some insight. One more question. Is someone checking the time? I don't want to.
Okay, I have a question. After all the research is done and you do everything, basically your client does not agree with you and he wants it his way. What do you do? Will you take the job or not?
So, yeah, it's okay. It's a good question. Okay. No, I mean, it's okay. Yeah. Usually the first thing that I can learn is directly from the questionnaires. If the client is having problem communicating with me through a written form, then that whole communication is not going to end up well. Because sometimes I'm going to ask them, can you please confirm this on Teamwork or Basecamp or somewhere else? And they're going to like call you on the phone and say, yeah, let's do that. And then you won't have like no archive of the decision. So I think that the questionnaires or the whole upfront communication helps a lot. But some of the things like user testing, you do that in the process of working on a project. But as a designer, I usually, when I send the first like a concept or wireframes, I would usually see if we are going to be a good fit. And usually we were, mostly because the feedback I got from the questionnaires were that they were willing to work on. Because if they write about unrealistic expectations in the questionnaires, and I know it's unrealistic, then I'm just not going to take on project. I mean, if they're expecting to you know, like change their revenue to like 50%, I mean, it's not going to happen. That's unrealistic. So this is like a red flag, and this is the feedback that I can get from the process. But usually when we get to work, there are a lot of challenges, of course. But I mean, if they won't listen to reason, then I usually just say to them, I mean, you're paying me to do something that works, not to be the tool of your choosing. So if you want me to do what you want, I mean, I can't guarantee for the results. And that will probably be the last project I will do with that client. I mean, that was usually the case. But I understand that for agency and bigger companies, it's usually a problem to just, you can't ditch a client, of course. Sometimes you have to think about everything that's going to affect. But I think it's important to build on good communication. I mean, that's the key.
My question would be almost the same. When is the point when you when you realize that you need to get up from the table and not to take the job?
It's a hard one. I would also say that when I get the questionnaires and when I have like a Skype call with a client, if I don't feel we are working on the same thing, like if our goals are completely different, then I would probably I wouldn't take on a project. Because like a simple example, you're working on making the website load fast, making it accessible, usable on mobile phones, whatever. And the client, and all the client cares is like animations, like that parallax effect or something that's like everyone else has it. How can you deliver results when you know that parallax effect, for example, that is badly implemented, or some other video that autoplays or whatever? How can you really guarantee any sort of results if it's going to slow down the whole website? And we know that the sooner the website loads, the better it will perform with the users. So if the client doesn't think that site performance is like a big issue, like, yeah, who cares? Like, no, it's not really a problem. Then either you have to educate them and tell them, yeah, it's a really big problem. You can send them studies like from the internet. There are a lot of Nielsen Norman Group has studies on performance, or like even Google Page Speed you can use to showcase them examples. But this is the first red flag that I see. So if they don't think like performance, in my case, it's that important, then I don't see how we could work. Because I would always be trying to solve the issue by optimizing something, by maybe using simple graphics or making everything accessible, and they would just say, no, I want to add 3 sliders to the homepage because we can showcase 3 times as much as products. I mean, that's not really going to solve anything. And our goal is to solve problems, right? Not to create even more problems. So, yeah. Okay, we are done. If you have any more questions, feel free to find me during lunch or somewhere, and thank you for your time.